Are you sure this is the right way home?
No. We might be just a tad bit lost.
It's not as bad as showing up to some random party in a costume.
Holy crap! What's that?
I'm a sucker for high-score-based falling object puzzle games. Games like Tetris, Dr. Mario, Puyo Puyo, and most of those strange Mario Party minigames that range from really fun to I hate this and question why anyone thought this was a good idea. These games were pretty big in the late 80s and early 90s, and while the genre is most definitely not gone, it's definitely not as prominent. But here in North America, the Nintendo Entertainment System's last officially licensed release, believe it or not, was one of these high-score-based falling object puzzle games. Let me introduce you to Wario's Woods. Wario's Woods is an action-based puzzle game where you play as Toad on his quest to, clear monsters out of trees? Look, it's a high-score-based puzzle game. The story is supposed to be nothing. But what is nice is this game plays a tad bit differently than a majority of these types of puzzle games. Instead of controlling where the objects land, that's out of your hands. This time you control Toad, who runs around moving things to where they need to be. When booting up a round, it'll start with a couple enemies ready and waiting to cause trouble. Then Birdo will pop up in the upper right-hand corner of the screen and drop you some bombs to remove those pesky creatures. To kill your enemies, you typically have to line up a bomb and 2 enemies in a row of 3. In most cases, it doesn't really matter how you line them up, but the further you go, the enemy kill patterns do change. But be careful, Wario likes to show up and ruin your day by dropping more enemies in. But in the end, your main goal is to clear the tree out as fast and efficiently as possible, then move on to the next tree. Obviously, the farther you go, the faster the drops and the bigger amount of enemies you're gonna have to face. It's your typical puzzle game. And just like all your typical puzzle games, this one comes with the 2-player versus mode. Each player gets their own screen and has to battle it out to be the last Toad standing. Now, that's essentially all this game is, and keep in mind, this is a 1994 action puzzle game. It's not about the amount of content this game has to offer, rather the amount of replayability. The replayability aspect is the most important factor to these puzzle games. Why is that? Because to get your money's worth, you gotta play these games multiple times to improve and genuinely enjoy the game. Take Tetris, for example, one of the most expertly crafted and addicting games of all time. In its original form, there's not plenty of side modes and gimmicks to play with. It's just simple Tetris. And this alone is one of the best-selling games of all time because of its addicting, fun-to-replay nature. So that begs the question, is Wario's Woods fun to keep coming back to? Is it just as addicting? Wario's Woods does get chaotic, and that's always a good time, but in my opinion, Wario's Woods is the puzzle game that's going to keep you thinking the most. Aside from Puyo Puyo, because some of those players should get a degree from Harvard for being able to get a combo higher than 3, but Wario's Woods offers its own refreshing spin on the genre that'll have you playing the game for maybe up to an hour. But here's the issue. Once you've already started playing it, you'll go for a while, yes. But this is one of those games where it's kind of a chore to be in the mood to boot up this game. Like once you set up and are playing it, it's gonna be a great fun time. But for some reason, I can just never bring myself to boot up the game. And this is gonna sound like a brag, but for games like Dr. Mario and Tetris, I don't really need to think that hard. I just fill things in where they need to be filled in, but for Wario's Woods, I gotta keep my mind on its toes along with my fingers, but due to that level of thinking, if you wanna zone out, play Tetris instead. That's going to be a much better game to zone out to. Now, alongside the release for Wario's Woods on the NES, we also got a version of the game for the SNES. It has polished graphics, better music, and more modes, voice acting, essentially everything you'd be looking for in a console upgrade. And when I say voice acting, there's little announcer voices that are really funny. Just listen to some of these.
Cool. Groovy. Whoa. Yowza.
I don't really know why these are the voices they chose, especially if it's for the Toads you're playing as, but either way, it's honestly really funny and really charming as you play through the game. But the Super Nintendo version also comes with other game modes, as I stated earlier. Game modes like Versus Computer. This pins you up against a computer enemy on a high-stakes one-on-one with various creative enemies and bosses. This is essentially multiplayer for people who don't have friends who like this game and refuse to play it with them because they're, quote, too good, or the Nintendo gods, again, quote, smile upon them. Okay, maybe that's a bit too specific. But if you're playing alone or are looking for a competitive experience, this is the mode to play. Also, it's fun seeing the little enemies. Now, other than that, gameplay-wise, that's the most I'm gonna get out of Wario's Woods. Yeah, it's a really fun action puzzle game. It's cool that it varies from the average puzzle game because it throws you right into the action, but I've stretched this out as far as I could. It's a decent action puzzle game that if you haven't already, give it a shot. It's a really good time. But there's one more interesting bit of information that I can squeeze out of this game. Everyone knows the ESRB, the Entertainment Software Rating Board. The people that are in charge of telling you, wow, this game sure is for babies, or don't let your kids even breathe the same air as this game. But back to Wario's Woods, this is the only game on the NES with an ESRB rating. I don't know why I spent so much time on that fact, but it's an interesting little detail. Overall, I really enjoy Wario's Woods. The intense color matching fun, while a chore to boot up, is rather addicting in the end. I would like to see more falling object puzzle games in the future, but for the time being, I guess I'll just have to stick to the classics.
Come here often. Yeah, me too.